SPYR.
Welcome back to Started Now. I'm your host, Jeff Sarris. This is the show where I talk to entrepreneurs to reveal the unexpected paths to where they are today. Today is a very special episode. I loved this conversation. It's with Trevor Van Meter, who is known as HeyTVM. He created the Non-Fungible Bones project, but I really wanted to talk to him about philosophy and positivity and living a life I guess worth leading, like for us, for who we are and who we want to be. It is a fascinating conversation. I love sort of philosophical discussions like this. So why don't we just dive right in? Without further ado, my conversation with Trevor from Non-Fungible Bones. I think it was that event where as soon as I heard you talking and just sort of your outlook on life, I believe it was that one. It was one of the spaces, but I believe it was that one. I was just like, I need to talk to him. I love your perspective on sort of your philosophy of life. It's so uplifting. I really like it.
I appreciate it. You know, some days it's hard to maintain for sure. And that's the struggle. That's the human struggle, right?
Uh-huh.
Of like, you know, fighting to constantly maintain your best self over your less self, or realize when your less self is driving so that you can push that less self out as soon as possible, right?
So
you cannot eject that less self completely. You just can be aware of it. So yes.
Yeah, I kind of want to unpack that. I like that best self versus less self. So I guess, how do you look at that specifically?
So I'm assuming we're jumping in and starting, right?
Yeah,
so,
I just start recording from the beginning. Okay. I chop it in somewhere. But yeah,
that's what I play it loose, and you know, that's how our vibe ups start and everything is just like just go for it. We'll see what happens.
Uh-huh.
But for me, you know, the whole best self, less self, I think we all have degrees of this in our person. And ultimately, you know, and I've been trying to, because I'm a visual person, I try to take these concepts and these philosophies and a lot of time turn them into visuals. But the way I think of it is you have one captain and two people who have the possibility to hold the wheel, right? And sometimes they're both grabbing for the wheel. There's one wheel, right? You know, it took me a very long time. And after being hurt by just life and becoming jaded and having things not worked out, the less self becomes bigger and bigger and stronger and has a way of hijacking your perspective. And the worst part about something like that happening is it happens in degrees and it happens over time. And then you don't realize that is who you are. You know, the way you perceive things, the way you make choices, that ultimately is who you are. And that once I realized that I wasn't who I wanted to be, I had become this person that I couldn't even recognize in terms of like what I set out to become and who I wanted to be. And here I was being this other entity. It took mindfulness and practice to push that person, that less self, down and give it less power and empower the part that could seek the positive and honor the spark of, like, for me in particular, of the things that made me want to become an artist.
Yeah. So when in your life was that moment, that realization that you had these two parts that you needed to sort of improve upon?
It's ongoing, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, I would say I've had a number of perceived failures, right? And, you know, you could perceive things as failures, or you can perceive them as life experience and learning experiences, all that. But I think after a few kind of just major falling outs of things that should have worked, and there was no reason they didn't work, and I gave it everything I had and still came up completely like worst case scenario happening, right? Where, you know, I started a game company and we worked our tails off and had funding and all this stuff. And then just a couple of factors that were completely, you know, some were out of my control, and then some things you are in control of, but you make the best choices. I would say anyway, after all of that kind of hit a worst case scenario, kind of bottomed out, had some trouble just trying to see the good in my life and things that ultimately we're still the same. I was still capable, still working, still like hustling and trying to figure things out, but your perspective changes. And then I remember listening to I was seeking growth and trying to become better. And I think you have to seek it out. And I came across a story. It's called The Magic Story, and it's about a man who owned, and this was like in the 1800s, maybe even earlier, owned a port. It burnt down, and then he went to debtor's jail and basically had this person who was on track and making the most of his life, and then due to circumstances outside his control, turned into an alcoholic, was put in debtor's jail, came out a completely different person. And then he started seeing himself walking around town and talking to the people he wanted to talk to and making deals with people he wanted to make deals with. And then one night he woke up and that shadowy figure was standing over him. And he's like, how can I be you? He's like, you can't possibly be your best self and your less self, as I call it, or you can't possibly be positive and negative at the same time. I can't enter your perspective unless you push that other self out. So it's kind of spoilerly, and I'm sure that the if you go look up the Magic Story, it tells it much better. But it kind of like pulled the veil over this idea that like, hey, you're not acting the way I know that you want to. And then at that moment, I was like, okay, it's time to get back to just changing my perspective. And the minute I did, and I kind of got back to the question of like, why am I an artist? Why am I an illustrator? Why am I doing any of this stuff? I started kind of seeking answers to those questions, and it's changed my life a lot for sure. And, you know, there's no magic bullet. It's a constant struggle, and we're all kind of doing it. But I would say there was that. And then I started I started an Audible account, and I started just, you know, every day listening to things that I connected with. It's not, I think that's the thing with this, like, I call it self-helpery books, right? Is that not all of it's you're going to make a connection with. And there's some things I connect with more than others, but you can mine from all of it and take the pieces that make sense and might help you a little bit and put them into your own philosophies and your own way of executing some of those ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So around what year, or maybe how old were you when you had this with the game company and sort of this turning point?
Well, the game company, you know, there's a series of things because I graduated school in '99, did freelance and started my own S Corp all the way up until 2008, 2009. Had a hard time during the great financial crisis or whatever. Pushed through that, and through that time, I had a toy company as well that didn't quite work out. Started the game company. That was around 2010. We started it. We made games for NG Moko. We had publishing deals. And then, so that was like 2010 to about 2012 or so, where we were just working 17-hour days, like doing your regular startup stuff. And I was like, this is it. This is my shot, and went hard. So that was about the time. It was around then, but then I had a couple opportunities that also like had a series for Disney that got shelved during 2013, 14 time. Had a few other opportunities that seemed big and nothing really happened. So it was probably around like 2015 where I was like, all right, I just need to start getting back to the root, to like honor my spark is what I call it, of like getting back to the root of why I decided to be an artist. So that's what it was around that time. And then around that time, I was studying ways to improve my mental fortitude and perspective. And then I also just got busy working hard.
Yeah. So diving into that study, was there like a particular inspiration even? Because I feel like that's a switch we need to, how do I want to say this? like a moment we need to like recognize in ourselves, and it's not easy because it's hard to know what we don't know or realize that we're at this point. Like were there maybe like podcasters or Audible or audiobooks, or was there something that you can like pinpoint that really like clicked it for you?
So I think because I'm more on the creative side, more on the visual side, I'm kind of naturally prone to like, I don't know, it's hard to turn these questions into like visual investigations almost. So the question that I just kind of asked myself, and again, like I identify as I've been moving it to artist, but I've been identifying as an illustrator animator. But ultimately, the goal here is to just create on your own terms for you and the people who care, right? But the question that got me kind of to the core of it, and I say honor the spark, your spark, like the reason you want to do this, and honor your quiet voice, which is always talking to you, but you can't hear because the rest of the world and now media and YouTube and Twitter, everything's screaming at you. So it's hard to get to the root of like that quiet voice that's telling you everything you need to do. Well, that quiet voice told me to say, why, like answer the question, what was the moment where you decided you want to be an artist? Or you decided you want to be a writer, you decided you want to be a lawyer or a doctor. We all have an answer for that question. And I could draw a line directly to Shel Silverstein where the sidewalk ends. And it's kind of interesting because that book and these moments, and the other one is a little critter. Like I just remember looking at these images as a kid. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do it. And then more specifically to Shel Silverstein, it wasn't so much about the drawing as much as it was about like the idea and the feeling that these poems and visuals kind of conveyed. And I was like, I remember looking at it and be like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do this. So I pulled everything back to that moment and started over, because a lot of my other work is very polished and very vectory and very, I don't know, it's very much a departure from where I landed on this style that it is a style, but it doesn't have a lot of the boxes checked of what I would normally call like good. I don't know. It's hard. It's kind of hard to explain. I call it a disposable style and approach that I try to elevate. And I always find some very interesting things. And then I also, for a long period of time, I was a pixel artist. So I brought a lot of those principles into that style as well that really work for it. But more importantly, I got back to like the heart of like, why? Like, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to suffer this type of life? Right. Like, because being creative and living creative life is not, I'm not sitting here saying, woe is me, but it's not easy, and it takes constant struggle and pursuit to like carve a life out of it as well. So,
yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's for some people. For some people, I see other people. I'm like, well, they don't seem to have any problem whatsoever. So,
see, that's the thing, though. I feel like you also know at the same time that that's not true. You know what I mean? Just based on all the philosophical nuggets of things you've created and spoken about over the years. Like you mentioned, just sort of failures, and you have the one where it's the stair step of failing all the way up. And it's like, I thought that was so on point. It's so like connecting it to Shel Silverstein and seeing that you saw sort of the message there along with it, putting that all together really, it really frames what you do in a beautiful way, because that is it. That's what I really love about your stuff is they're like little philosophical nuggets that are engaging visually. And I just love that approach. It feels so uniquely you.
And I appreciate it. I've tried to also get better at saying thank you. I think a lot of creators they'll deflect and all that. And I mean, that was my mode for the longest time, but I thank you. And I work hard at that stuff. And I think, like, for example, I think that was the the secret of success or the stairway to success was just, stacking failures, right? A lot of the NFT stuff and the apparel stuff is like, the idea is just make some kind of positive message, but make it cool, right? Like it's not nobody wants you to like point a finger, like, hey, be positive, right? You instantly like you're like, don't tell me what to do. Like I think most people have like that. So I think the goal with a lot of these things is to take cliches that become cliche for a good reason because they're true, and turn them sideways so that you think of them in a new way, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and telling someone to be positive versus being positive, because that's something that right away I recognized in you is like, you are a very positive person. There's something about you that like I feel like you raise the energy in the room in a great way, which I love.
I appreciate it, but again, it's a struggle. Like I think that's our default mode, and importantly, like when we're interacting with people. But I think kind of the dangerous thing for creatives is, and living a creative life, is that you're sitting at your desk, and then there's an interesting book called A Will to Fail that we all kind of have. And when you're sitting by yourself and you're not keeping that stuff in check, my personal vice is like frustration. Like I get frustrated that I'm not more effective, that I'm not reaching enough people, that I'm not this or that or whatever. And then you stew on it. And then on top of it, you have so many distractions that like, you're not really focused on like what's going right. So for me, it's easy to be positive one-on-one or in a group of people. I love that. I think it feels good. But the reality is a lot of times we're not working with other people. And again, like probably more specifically to creatives who are in the dungeon and getting to where your world gets very small. So it's something that I struggle with personally, is taking some inventory of what's actually good, and taking the time to be with people as well. So we're all busy.
How do you take that inventory? I mean, I know it's a very I know it's not like a cookie cutter answer, but I am curious if you have any sort of techniques or anything.
I feel like, it's the pyramid of, the three things you can focus on. At your base, you need your health. So I exercise trying to push it to 5 times a week if I can. I think your body, and then your mind, your mindset would be the center sliver. And then the top is, your purpose, your reason for doing the things that you're doing. And I think the top two are very related, but they're not the same. Because like keeping your mindset is one thing, but having a North Star or an objective and goals and purpose and feeling like you're put here to do that thing. This usually is how I can personally kind of reset and get back to work a lot of times. And then, my family is huge part of my life. And, a lot of it's so interesting because a lot of things I could do 10 years ago, I can't do today. The balance, seeking balance and remaining chill is one of my favorite sayings. It's like, it's tough. And I think as young people go on in life, you'll just find that, the only guarantee is change. And the more you can kind of check with those 3 pillars, family is a big part of my purpose, right? And that's a big part of the reason why I work. So but they're always changing. It's always changing. It's so strange. So I don't know. I just think it's taking the time to get quiet, taking the time to think, taking the time to get organized, but then also doing the work. These are all parts of the same solution, right?
Yeah. It all fits together. And would you say, so change, I love how you said that just change is constant. It's just what we need to be comfortable with it and understand that things aren't the way that they should be. The things are. And it's sort of like nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. sort of like that approach, like knowing like things will change. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is how it is. How am I going to look at it? How am I going to approach whatever this is? And I think it's such a valuable perspective to take.
Well, I think that the danger too of, and I got kind of stuck in this, as you start saying, well, it changed in the past and it changed for the worse, which means the future change is going to be bad, because that's the script that and I knew it so well, right? But the truth is, if you're not kind of like keeping a handle on it, and they've done so many studies of this idea. You walk in a room and tell everybody, look for something red. Now tell me where there's something yellow. Well, I wasn't looking for yellow. Well, that's why you didn't see yellow. A closed mind cannot catch the way a hand that's open can catch, right? So having an open mind and understand that you are enough to take on any emergency that may arise in your life, and just not be afraid and say, let's roll. I'm ready, because I know something's coming. Something's always coming. And just kind of knowing that you're enough in that situation is usually like, it kind of alleviates some of the fear. And usually running towards your problems always have a way of, or running towards change, and like forcing your mind to be like frosty and ready. Like, it's kind of back to that. I should probably look it up, but the Will to Fail, in that book, one of her recommendations was to have every month have a deck of cards where you could pull one that would make you do something that would break your comfort zone. Like, I'm going to get on a bus and I'm going to ride it, and I'm going to get off somewhere where I have no money, no plan, and then I'm going to get home, right? Like, putting yourself in a situation and realizing whatever you're afraid of or whatever you feel like is stopping you is probably so incredibly small compared to like other things that could happen to you in your life. And even if they are big things, you can still overcome them, and be completely resilient and wonderful, and get a thrill from doing it, and probably learn something along the way as well. So
yeah, there's a satisfaction to it,
right?
Like the thrill, like you accomplished something, because sort of like stasis, just having everything in perfect balance, it's boring. Like it's not how we're like meant to be wired, but it's what we strive for, But
it is like, we are wired to seek comfort.
Yeah.
We are wired to like avoid conflict, avoid discomfort, avoid all those things, because it's the whole lizard brain, right? And I worry for my kids, because I call them like the wet wipe generation. They've had everything is just, your tushy's going to be fine and soft, and it's like, no, man, that's not the way. Like, we grew up and we went through the grinder. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't. So I'm probably a little bit more resilient, because I'm a crusty old boomer. I'm not a boomer. But somebody who is younger said anybody over 20 is a boomer.
Yeah, right? That's so silly. Just in NFTs specifically, people are like, right, everyone's 20. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I got the biggest kick. I thought it was funny, because I'm up there, right? But I feel like being an 80s kid made me tough, because I was a latchkey kid. You were just kind of like, good luck, I'll see you at 6, and then you just hopefully survived, right? For my kids, I can't even imagine that life for them. They would not be prepared. So I just think this is one of the things that like you can set out solutions to put yourself in, don't put yourself in uncomfortable situations necessarily, but challenge yourself, and challenge, and more importantly, like challenge the things that you feel like are holding you back. And like, for the most part, if you would just sit down and make a list of like, okay, let me make a list of the problems or the things, the obstacles, right? And then you scratch out the top of the list. Instead of obstacles, it's a to-do list. You just made a to-do list. Knock those things out. And most of the time, if you break them down to individual things, it's quite easy to knock some of those things out. So yeah,
that makes me think about Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way. Have you read that one?
Yes, that's I haven't read it, but that's a Stoic saying.
Yeah, it comes from
Marcus. Is he the Daily Stoic? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Stoicism is awesome. It's quite brutal and quite honest. And I think for some of us, the edges might be a little sharp in terms of like, yeah, it's true, but I don't like it. Right? So it's like, the truth hurts, right? It's like so I like softer, possibly even more spiritual ways to think about things. But I love stoicism, and I love the fact that like in every problem lies the answer, and it's true. It's true.
Absolutely. So that softer spiritual kind of approach, do you have a definition of what that is?
Again, that's kind of back to like, what do you connect with, right? Know yourself. Know, like, if you're hardcore and you can be a stoic, that's awesome, man. But I just know that, like, that even though, like, like my collection's based on skeletons and like all, it's like all these things, there's a softer side of me that just, like most people, just kind of seek out something that feels a little better. So I just think that just comes down to like personal preference, and like what you connect with.
Yeah. So there isn't a particular like philosophy or spirituality you connect with specifically.
No, I mean, I really like New Thought. Neville Goddard in particular is one of my absolute favorites. I've made a lot of connections with that. A traditional Christian might find it deeply offensive, possibly, but it's the idea that that's I don't you have to be careful, because like I like it, I connect with it, and the idea is that this thing we label as God is simply imagination, and you basically become what you think about, and all this other stuff that the fables of the Bible are this idea that the most powerful thing in your universe is I am, and putting I am in front of whatever you want to be, and stating it and believing it, and belief becomes the most powerful force, period, full stop. So that's what I connect to. I like it, but I'm also not like, it gets complicated once you start talking about spirituality, because we all have like degrees of things, but I don't know. That's the one that I connected with, and a little bit more than like, say, stoicism.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally, like, that makes perfect sense to me. When you say spirituality, are you thinking sort of like in the religion sense? Because I know there's sort of the two sides of it, like spiritual versus religious spiritual, because like I don't really have the religious side at all. Like I'm much more like, I'm really interested in the philosophies of life and things that are all about improving ourselves and doing our best towards and for others, So I'm just curious where you lie on that.
It's kind of, I have an interesting answer, maybe. But to me, the answer is like, I don't need to put a definition. Like, I don't need, I think that's one of the issues, is that like our ability to communicate and understand it varies so much between like person and person. And a lot of this comes down to like vocabulary, for example. It's like, so this is one example. If your business is on the rocks in the US, for example, that means it's in trouble, right? But in the East, a business that's built on the rocks says it's a solid foundation, right? So there's a lot of things that get lost in translation. And one of the ideas in Neville Goddard's work is that there's been a misunderstanding that these stories are not literal. They're philosophical stories that, for example, the idea of sacrifice, and this gets, again, I don't want to like get too crazy, but like,
I mean, I'm good going as far as you want, because I just love this stuff.
I know,
so.
But you get dicey because people have some hardcore beliefs when it comes to this, and for me, for it to be functional, I just don't have to have it defined, and I don't have to say, well, this is how it is, because one thing I know is like, things change, your perspective change. Anybody who's dealing in absolutes is probably going to have trouble, right? So I try to keep an open mind, but like, for example, this idea of like Jesus and Christianity, well, if you wanted to flip it on its head and take a different perspective on it, you basically have to sacrifice what you are today, put that to death, and be reborn a little better tomorrow. And the message in there is that's how you constantly improve. Now, is that what the takeaway is supposed to be? Probably not for most people, but this is what I found most interesting about it is like, you know, there's just a lot of things that I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, that like, if I want to improve and be better tomorrow, I've got to give up what was holding me back today, sacrifice that, and be reborn tomorrow. And then ultimately this idea of a cross, and this is one that I arrived at my own, but while listening to this, is like the idea of a cross, for example. Well, it's a loaded image and all that, but like maybe the message was lost that if you're pushing every day to get above like 85% and you operate every day like that, you're going to succeed, right? So this should be your daily meter. It's almost like a meter that you push up and you say, all right, today I'm going to push it. It doesn't have to be 100%. That's tough to maintain, but you can push to 80, 85% every day and change your life and change who you are and put to rest the person who was. So
this is very fascinating. I have not encountered that specifically, like at all, even remotely. And like, I like the thought of that. The symbolism of that is amazing.
I arrived at that one myself, but like it came from listening to this and sparking ideas. And then again, you spark ideas, you grasp onto what you connect with. And then I feel like you develop your own philosophies. And I try to do that again, visually, I'm a visual thinker. So I always try to put visual to it. So I mean, you've heard this before. It's like you stitch together. If every day is some kind of a success, and you stitch together those days, your life will be a success. It's math. It's math almost, right? But anytime, me personally, if I can come up with a concept that like you have a little breakthrough and you're like, oh wow, I should try that. That's what I feel like I was put here to do. So,
yeah, I really love that. And you're sort of describing. Well, maybe I like to look at like opinions, like strong opinions, loosely held. Like I want to find sort of the edges of what I believe and see like, oh, is there something different? I know when it comes to like religion and things like that, it's a lot harder to have those conversations for some people because there's a certain set of beliefs. But I think there's such value in pushing those boundaries for ourselves, because the more we hold on to what we believe, the more rigid we are in where we can go and what we can become in this like limited time we have on the planet.
But you just described rigor mortis, right? You know, so if you think about how muscles grow when you work out, you tear them a little bit, which means pushing past your boundaries, and then you get stronger because of it. Your mind is no different. Your mind is actually exactly like that, I feel like, because, you know, this is, you know, I think about it often of like how can you continue to grow and get better? And the only way is to like challenge yourself, to push yourself and grow past what you are today. This is how, you know, everything in nature, this is how it works. This is how roots grow, you know, you know, inside of you is a seed, and also inside of you is an oak, right? But you haven't become that yet. You haven't grown to that. You know, if you think about like, and a lot of this comes back to like, first of all, what kind of seed are you, right? What kind of seed are you? Because if you don't know that and you're trying to grow into oak and you're really a cactus, I don't know, right? It's like you might be also growing towards the wrong thing. So like, I don't know, but just in general, if seeds quit, they don't grow into what they're meant to become, right? So this is the same thing for your mind, is that if you're happy right where you are, you're going to stay right where you are. And the truth, the kind of hard truth is a lot of us are happy right where we are. And a lot of us aren't willing to do what it takes to grow past.
And would you say happy or content?
This is a tough one, because I've been degrees of happy and I've been degrees of content. You know, like I said, my vice is frustration, which I believe comes from dissatisfaction. You know, it's like, and I've talked, one of my favorite teachers, of course, an art teacher, his name's Bob Rankin. He's an artist out of Raleigh. He's fantastic. And I talked to him the other week, and I don't know, like that dude's happy. That dude, like nothing you could say would shake, he wouldn't get shook a little bit. And then I could catch in my voice that like, and describing to him like my experience with where I am versus where I would like to be is dissatisfaction. Right. So I feel like that's kind of the thing that lands on all of our laps is like, I don't know. Like, I've talked to people who are completely, totally happy where they are. I don't know if I'll ever be, I don't know if I'll ever be satisfied, I guess. But it's not like a greedy thing. It's just more like, can you operate your life exactly the way that you want it? Right. And I think one of the traps that I've fallen into personally is this idea that being a workaholic will achieve that. So without my work, I almost don't even know who I am anymore. Right. And
you're describing me.
Right.
Like
well,
that's
I think,
exactly the same.
I feel like that's most people these days, because we find ourselves in this hustler's mentality. It's like, if you're not grinding, you're not right. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, and this whole past year, I know everybody, I just watched the video and I was like, dang it. Was everybody at NFT space, like this Web3 stuff has flipped my whole world upside down. And it's absolutely true for me. Mm-hmm. Because before this, and like most creatives, you're trying to figure out how you're going to piece together a living, right? Which usually results in either selling something or trading time for money. And that's how most of us are trained and understand how to do things. Well, I've been training to be a digital artist my entire life. And I would be willing to like put my name right next to anybody in this industry and say, if there's anybody that's built for this, it was me. Because I don't know like what called me to make, like, for example, those animations. But what's the made back on that? There was none. I just felt obligated to do it. Well, I think NFTs kind of came along and answered the other part of that story, which is, okay, you're a digital artist, and now people can actually find value in something that is inherently disposable. Again, we're kind of back to this idea of what's disposable. It's like, I just download it, right click save, right? Well, that's kind of the problem. And it's been the problem this whole time, except now what we have is an immutable proof that you own something, and the physical item might be the thing that becomes less valuable than the digitally certified thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm all in.
Well, and these animations, like you were saying, there wasn't an ROI necessarily on doing them. And you had been doing them for a long time. And it was like, maybe how many years do you think you were doing the style?
2015.
Yes,
I started,
15.
I was like, I started, I was making one a day. I was like hardcore. And then I was like, I got busy, you get busy and life goes on. So again, I just made them to put a certain idea or vibe out there without any real expectation of like getting anything back from it. And then the other thing that came along was like, I say Giphy, Jiffy, and then, sharing stickers and experiences through Instagram or Snapchat or any of those. Well, I was like, okay, this could be it, right? Well, I had like 3 billion impressions, like with a B, like, yeah. And no ROI on it, right? And on top of it, they would kind of block anything that you put your name on too. So like there was no way for people to find their way back to me, but everybody used it to express themselves. What is more powerful than that? I don't, you listen to a song to experience a feeling, and then you use artist work to express an emotion, yet there's no like, hey, thanks for that. It's disposable, and I believe that has an enormous value that is hard to crack. Like, what? Yeah, it does, but like, just I'm not going to pay for it, right? That's the mentality. So I think NFTs in general like solve some of these things and give me the ability to like focus on the parts that I love. I think that's the other thing is like for the past 4 years, I had a store. I had a shop. And I absolutely loved every minute of it. However, I was also working full time while I was doing it.
Mhm.
So basically, imagine somebody coming into your office every couple hours and then talking to you for 30 minutes each stop, because it's such a small store. You couldn't just say, hey, have a look around, because they're right there. Like, so you always had to like talk to make connections. And I had a bike accident in July of 21 where I had like a broken sternum, a collapsed lung, and a concussion. Well, in that moment, two things happened. One that I kind of knew but didn't acknowledge was that it just didn't work without me, right? And it didn't do quite enough to justify trying to scale it, which I was trying to do for 3 years. And then the other thing was again, kind of getting back to the pillars of your life and your family. I was trading nights and weekends and trying my best to get it to that point where it could tip and be a little more self-sustaining. I woke up from that accident and didn't want to do it anymore. So what do you do? What do you do in that moment? I was like, I need to be with my kids. And I don't know, it's very, very odd. But at the same time, while all that's happening, I'm already seeing the writing on the wall, because I've started investigating heavily into like, what is an NFT and how can I become involved? Yeah. So yeah, my life was flipped. Like, NFTs have flipped my life into this place where I don't know, like things shift and more change is coming. But as far as I'm concerned, this is like one of the best changes that could have happened for me.
Yeah. And so you were working full time. Was that for someone or for your own agency?
I have an escort. Basically, I'm a hitman for agencies. Yeah. Right. Like, I have a handful of people who I would do work for, and in particular work for a company and a good friend, Phil, who owns Upper Quad, and they did work with Google. And I would the one project that was kind of a constant through the past 7 years was Santa Tracker, and I did a ton of work on that. And then anything else that would come across my desk, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't have a choice. I got to do it, because most of the freelance life is basically, while you're working on your job, right? Like, while you're doing it, you got to be thinking about how you're going to get and what's the next job, because in particular to illustration, a lot of the times it's so specific that you do the job and they're like, thanks. That's all we need of that. Like, it's not reoccurring. You did the job. See you later. Now you got to go find somebody else who needs the same thing, but a different person. So that's where it varies a little bit from like design or like back end stuff like that. So I've been doing a ton of freelance stuff. Some stuff I don't post about because, it's pay the bills work. And then some stuff I'm very proud of. But then we're always back to like, well, it's not mine. The truth is I could die tomorrow and they'll find somebody else. So that's, it just goes to show that, like, as much as we all want to say that we're so important, everybody's replaceable. I would like to think I'm not, right? But I think once you find your perfect expression, maybe you are replaceable. And if it is for you and the thing that you're making is something that you consider important and you can get other people on that boat, then it becomes a whole different story.
Yeah, there's something about leaving our mark on the world and just humanity in some way. Like, it doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be just the 4 people closest to you, but there's something there, something real, that it's hard because like what we do is like brand development and like web design and things. So we're always behind the scenes. And like, I've run into that so many times where it's like, this is awesome. I feel good about it. I feel proud of it, but it's not mine. Like, we did this for them and we helped and it's awesome. Like, it's something to be proud of, but at the same time, there isn't that like that little added piece of like, oh yeah, I put my thumbprint on this, and in a way.
Right. And that's it's kind of the like the same thing that can make that job so frustrating is, I think, and I've always had this philosophy, for better, for worse, is that in order for something to be good, you need to put a piece of yourself into it. You have to care about it. You have to want it to be good. And then it turns, and then you put the work in and the effort in to make it good. which makes it very difficult, because what happens when it comes back and you're like, well, not that sucks. I want to do it again. Right. So there's like anytime I would do work, it would also be kind of an emotional state for me when it just didn't, people are like, I don't like that. Right. Well, I put my heart into it. I don't care. It's wrong. It's not right. And how do you not take that personal when you put a piece of yourself into it? So often I would have to go off, have a little pity party, come back, get back to work and do the work. And I think sometimes things are better. And then sometimes things become perfectly average when you have too many people involved as well. Like what I say is that the client, I have a couple sayings. One is the client just loves to like knock the edges off of everything, right? Which makes it kind of boring, right? So not in every case. And listen, I don't like bad mouthing clients, because I've always been grateful to have work and to be able to do the job, and for them to select me to do it. Amazing. But there's just a prima donna in me that's always going to bitch about it to some level, right? I don't know.
No,
I don't know what.
And I think it's just how we're wired. It's just what it comes down to. It's nothing specifically about you, and it's not against the clients in any way. It's really, you're pouring your heart and soul into something, and it's just hard to have someone critique your, like, a part of you.
I think so. And as you do it more, it becomes less and less, but there's always some degree of it where you're like, well, you're wrong, but okay, let's, it's like because I haven't done this for 20 years. Don't worry about it. You probably know what you're talking about, right?
Uh-huh. It's what you want to say.
No, of course you don't say that. Well, I've known creatives in the past that'll just, you push back and you choose your battles. And from time to time I have said, I hear what you're saying, but a lot of times, you choose your battles in the sense of like, you're probably not doing the right work if you have to explain it every time.
Yeah.
Right. And then if they get it, I don't think you did it well enough, because if you got to explain it, especially with visuals, you should at a glance get what you're trying to communicate, which you also have to combat with what people carry as clients in particular. Well, my wife likes green, and we just got blinds that are green. So can you put some green in there? It's right. It's got nothing to do with what you just made. Right. But you choose your battles. You choose your battles for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So what did it look like having a physical place? Because I don't mean like visually, but for you, how was that, maybe that first day even opening the door? Because that is the dream of sorts, like having a place, having a, like we've always had this little dream of a little coffee shop, and it's like by the beach in a VW bus kind of thing. And like, right. Just this thing. And you have the vision of what it will be, but then you have the reality of what it is. So like, how did those sort of come together?
So you just described it perfectly, because it's exactly that. I had a dream. I started putting together ideas even before I knew I was going to do it. Started putting together a plan. I opened the shop in Greenville because somebody just had extra space, and they're like, you can use the front if you want. I'm like, all over it, right? Like, it was this great opportunity. And then you go to do it, and the day it was like a week after I opened, my wife, we've been trying to move to Wilmington for years. Well, she got the job. That I was like, I don't know, we'll see if you get it, and then we'll make decisions. So I had to close what I opened in Greenville and then open it in Wilmington all over again. The good thing is, like, I learned a lot, learned what not to do in Greenville and what I could do better in Wilmington. And it was like a 400 square foot store. And it wasn't that big, but it was manageable. And I bought a DTG printer, and I had a supply. I had a place to do printing. I had a place to sell stuff. And then, all these plans are laid down. But ultimately, like for the people who want to start something like that, you're not really starting with ideals, right? Like, it's like, there was no ideal situation for me starting this, because I didn't have the funds to really do it at a level. I didn't want to take out a $200,000 loan for something that was unproven. I wanted it to prove itself a little bit. And then you you like, for example, I fell in love with my store and did some research and had a strategy of like, well, they're opening a hotel right next to me. Well, everything was like on track, and then COVID happened, for example. So there's things that just kept happening that were making it harder and harder. And then, like you said, you have this idea for a coffee shop. Wouldn't that be fun? Go work at a coffee shop. Go first, before you do anything, go work at a coffee shop and tell me if it's fun. Because the reality is, like, for a lot of these things that exist on a pedestal in our mind, once you get into day to day, I loved everything I put in the store. I loved talking to people. I loved almost everything about this, like the store in one sense. But then you start getting worn down by the day-to-day stuff. And especially if you're doing it, like I did everything by myself. Like I was the one there. And then I tried to grow it where I could have somebody at least come in and help on the weekends. And I think this is what you have to do when you're starting any business. You got to tough it out and make it happen. But like in 2019, I would have been telling you a whole different story. I'm like, no, the amount I was able to grow in a year, I thought was extraordinary. Mm-hmm. With the idea that, like, okay, I made it through year one. It sucked. It was hard, but I made a ton of connections, met a ton of people, ton of friends, and people who would come back. Right. And then, because Wilmington is somewhat seasonal, it's a beach town, Wrightsville Beach is right down the street. Well, the people who may have found me that first year will be back the next year and bring their friends and family. And then I'll meet a whole new batch of people, and they would come back the third year. Well, 2020 happened, and lockdowns happened, and the hotel closed. It was like all these things that started happening. It was like, it just got hard. It just got really hard to the point where I was like, why am I doing this to myself? When ultimately, if I ran the numbers, I could just do my online store and not have to sacrifice everything in terms of time with family and things like this to make it work. So I'm still trying to like recover from like shutting that down and moving it online, and then trying to figure out how it matches with NFTs. Again, change. Oh yeah. But like, I don't think COVID helped.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, then the other thing, because I was the only person, I didn't have any employees. I didn't get PPP or any, I didn't get any of that stuff. So, and on paper it was profitable. But I also didn't pay myself. So yeah, it's tricky. It's
definitely
tricky.
Yeah. And
I don't know if I went on a rant there. I don't know if I answered your question. But
no, it's good. I
would just encourage people to like go for it, but also just know that, like, without knowing, I kind of built a prison for myself because I was always there. And then it did start to affect my creative, because you're constantly interrupted, or you're constantly dealing with store stuff, and not, like, for me, the part that was the juice that was worth the squeeze was being able to create things for the store. And then there's the other 80% of having it made, worrying about quality. During COVID, I couldn't get like a black hoodie. It's like you couldn't get something. I'm like, that's going to hit. Let's go back to get it at the supplier. I'm sorry, we don't have that anymore. And it's not coming in for 9 months, just got old, got super old. So I'm restructuring.
For right? Sure. Are you still doing like the direct to garment? Were you able to keep the printer and do the stuff for your online store? Or
I've found an awesome partner, a guy named Justin, who works at Microprint, and they have a DTG sublimation. So I've been looking for partners because I enjoy the process of like making a thing, doing rapid application, and like figuring out what works, being able to adjust colors and things, and then be able to say, I've got a physical good right there on the spot. So I still have the printer, but it's this was the other thing, is I was driving at the time. We were staying at Wrightsville Beach. So I was driving from Wrightsville Beach all the way out to the airport, all the way downtown, and then all the way back. It's like the trifecta of inconvenience, like 30 minutes, which in Wilmington is like, you go anywhere, it's going to be 20 minutes. You could go down the street, so 20 minutes somehow. But like, I was spending a lot of time on the road, just driving around like a madman. So I enjoyed it very much. But there's things that I could I will not miss.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd rather have somebody else deal with that stuff. So
yeah, offloading the things that aren't adding value to our lives is so important.
But it's tough. It's tough for some things because, again, if you don't have the means, it's you're on the hook. You're the one that's got to do it, right? And I think again, this is why I encourage people, like, go work at a coffee shop and look. Like, if you want to start a coffee shop, go work at one for 6 months. You could get a job at a coffee shop, no problem. Then you start understanding that, like, it does require more people. I was doing the jobs of like 5 people in one day, and that's not always something that would be easy to scale until you hit a certain point, and then you start finding people to delegate. That's why they always have advice. They're like, "Hey, why don't you just delegate?" I'm like, "To who? What?" That's right. It's like, I need money to get the person, and then on top of that, finding talented people who are also disciplined. Like, those two things usually don't meet.
Yeah.
In one person. So.
Yeah, and they're not going to be as invested in your company as you are. Just at the end of the day, it just isn't going to be that way.
And I can't blame them because when I had a job, I was like, man, I'm going to work on my stuff. I would wake up at 5 a.m. when I was in New York and had my first job. I would wake up at 5. I would spend my creative energy before 9:30 on my work, and then they could have what's left over, right? Is it right? I don't know. Maybe not, but like, I think it's human condition to be focused on you and what you want, right? So to me, that's all more ammo to go do your thing.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I love that you did scavenger hunts and things to add fun, because I know like fun is at the core of sort of how you look at life. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that. As an adult, how do you have fun? Because it's hard, right? Like, there aren't opportunities for just unstructured play and the things that we had when we were young.
I would say I don't get to have too much fun. Again, like, life is tough when you have 2 young kids, and like, that's who I have fun with. Like, we get to go out and do stuff. That's all that I get to have fun. And then that's, the rest is work. And I don't know. I guess that sounds kind of sad, but like, I don't know. I'm so invested in my work and get satisfaction out of that. If I can have a good day and create something, that's fun. That's what's fun for me.
I mean, I connect with that for sure, because like I would always say, I don't know if hobbies, I have businesses. It's not like businesses, but sort of like service-based things. I'm into photography. Then I start doing portraits and weddings. I'm into the paleo diet. We start a platform around that, start speaking, get a health coach certificate. Like, all these different things crop up, and it's like, I get the satisfaction from building. Like, I want to make something that's tangible in the world, not physical. It's usually digital based, but there's something there. Like, I do find that fun.
Well, I think, as you become an adult, your just time is limited. And if you're going to make time for your kids, you're going to make time for your life. For me, it's like, my free time, like when I have an hour and a half in the morning, I go work out, and I just count like it's something I should do. I enjoy it. I feel better after I do it. Is it fun? No. I like it when it's done, right? Like, when it's done, yeah, I'm great. I feel like as you become an adult, some of these things take up your time that you would go normally, do something. But we moved to Wilmington to live like a beach life. And we've been here since 2018. Still I would not consider myself living the beach life, right? That's on my objective, is to start spending more time and just carving off a day to go to the beach and things like that. But this, again, like, opening a store took time. Starting two NFT projects in 1 week, launching them the same week, have basically my whole past year has been focused on these projects. So
yeah. So what does it look like for you right now? I know we're coming up on time. I don't want to take too much more, but right now, what does your sort of day-to-day look like, and what you're looking at moving forward?
Right now, I'm split between Not Fungible Bones and Monster Buds. I've been working on both of those projects, and that is just, I'm doing my best to balance the both because I'm the only creative on both projects, and there's always like a mountain of things to do. So right now that's been like 100% of my attention, with the objective here probably, I've been working on a new collection for NFBs that will be will operate a little bit differently and add value to the bone holders in a way that they can also kind of trade. I don't know like how much you have gone into like NFT, like if you do deep dives on that stuff, but for bones, I send art to the existing NFT and continue to update and add value to the things that people have already purchased. So
it's a beautiful mechanism too, because I haven't seen that done much. And it's very interesting because you're expanding. Like they start with the one piece of art, the animation, but then to expand that, to have that expand over time it's really unique, and I love it.
So we look at the NFBs like a vault, right? We just can keep adding gems into your vault, and you don't have to do anything. Now, the one thing that's been interesting about it is that they seem to love, people who are paying attention, at least, and part of our community and everything, seem to love each piece, but also want to love each piece separately, right? So it's like we have a way for you to pick what you display your NFT as, like on OpenSea, and you can name it and these type of things. But ultimately, because it's all one entity, it created some unusual, I won't say problems, but just conditions. So this is why the next collection is going to be separate, so people can do, they want to trade, they want to sell, they want to buy, they want to do all kinds of stuff that you can do with NFT. They want to thrill the mint, all of this. So I'm working on that collection. And then for the Monster Buzz is a completely different project. Well, we've been building a game since we started. And then I think the implications for layer 2 consumable, in-game consumable cards and things like this, it will be the future, I think, of NFTs. In particular, I think gaming is going to kind of lead the way, because if I get a pack of cards, I can use those cards in the game. I can list them on the marketplace. I can combine those cards and make something new. These are all like amazing things that have been done, but haven't been done in a way that you own the value and decide how to issue those things. So two very, very different projects. One's primarily art-based, and then the other is has a lot of verticals because it's a cannabis based project, a lot of verticals for other branding opportunities, other partners. And then in particular, if you think of the cannabis space, where are these folks who are ultimately treated like criminals their whole life for doing the thing that they like, have nothing in their space that I feel like is a valid offering in terms of property. And I mean that on the IP and NFT, but like IP level, where like Sony, Disney, like these guys couldn't touch this space with a 10-foot pole, and they can't do it for another 20 years probably. It's like, so we see a real opportunity to become something like Smoky Months, right?
There you go.
It's very interesting because I don't really partake. It's not really my thing, but I also don't judge. I think that's one thing, is like for some people it is medicine. For some people it is like the way they either cope or deal with issues, traumas, pains, all of this. So we want to just bring something fun to that space as well. So right now I'm kind of like got a foot in each project. I'm trying not to get split in half.
Yeah, for sure. And is Not Fungible Bones all you, or is there a team there? Because there's definitely a team at Monster Buds.
Yeah, so we have a pretty it's a tight team at Buds, and it's ultimately like Greg and I are driving that project, and I'm more on the creative visual and animation, and then game design part of it, and then Greg is also on the game design part of it, and then running helping like run the day to day, and then locking down deals with partners and things like that. And then he has a very deep understanding of Web3. For Bones, we have Grim and Davey, but they're very busy with with the like I've said in the past that NFBs was a kind of a cute project for them. They deal multi-million-dollar deals working for Fortune 500 companies. So ultimately, I'm the one driving the ship and moving forward. We'll be continuing that, but I've also aligned some partnerships with people who can help on other fronts. So it kind of puts us in a unusual position of like the setup was make the project so that I would be the one where the hook's on. It's on me. I'm the one doing the heavy lifting, and I'm okay. I'm loving it because all I have to do is make the art, and then they run their process on updating it. So so when we built the format, it was built with this idea that I would be the one kind of pushing the project. So yeah. and then we have Rizzy, who is awesome and part of helping run the NFB community. And I think we'd be dead in the water without him for sure.
Yeah, so it's a lot that goes into all of it. And just one more thing, how are you looking at them from like a revenue perspective? Because that is the big question always. And you did mention for the Buds project, like sort of partnerships and things, and even NFB. But yeah, how are you looking at that?
Well, isn't that the kind of $1 trillion question?
It really is.
Everybody right now. It's very interesting because when I came into this space, it's so crazy how everyone seemed to have all the answers, and if you did things a certain way, you're doing it wrong because that's not how we do it, bro. Right? I think the people who are sticking around and just trying to figure it out right now will be the ones. I mean, you hope that there'll be a lot of room to grow and discover answers to this, right? So one of the, and I don't want to call it handicap, but like one of the things that I think people forget about Bones is that we gave away half of them for free, like close to half, because it was a free mint. Mm-hmm. People could come and then they could add some to their bucket. So I don't have the exact number, but it was approximately half were given away for free. The royalties kind of helped a little bit, but at the same time, without volume, without trading, without a bunch of that stuff happening, that goes away pretty quickly. So for the NFB side, it's a bit of a question mark, right? But at the same time, as an artist, this is where I'm gonna be trying some things and trying like the next collection, while I feel like bone holders will be able to feel like they got a little bit of made back for being part of the Bone fam. But then I think there'll be another side similar to the first offering where hopefully it'll also generate some revenue. And then I'm sitting on a ton, so much art for HeyTVM that I plan on like continuing to release collections in a different way. Like we're gonna have your traditional mint show up, Thrill of the Mint. If you have a bone, you'll probably be able to grab one for free, if not more. And then if you don't, you can still show up at a certain time and grab some, and all be very reasonable priced. And then as I start dropping some art, I'll be trying out some one of ones, some open editions. The wave that I have, let's see. I don't know if it's, well, I have a ton of, here, I got a piece right here. I don't know if it's not gonna blur it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I have a ton of waves. Uh-huh. And kind of like we'll make it a full circle here, that my waves also have the characteristics of like a fingerprint. And the idea and the concept behind these waves is that your vibes become your identity, right? And it's the truth that like your vibes, your perception, the waves you put out into the world, usually those are the vibrations that you get back and ultimately define the way you see this world, right? So I have a ton of these pieces that have very I think, a very unique take on something that everybody understands what a waves is, and then done in my style has a lot of the things that I cherish, which are contours, very graphic in style. Some have light treatments of color, some have heavier treatments of color, things like this that I'll be exploring with and releasing those as well. So,
Nice.
So that will help hopefully fund us and help us continue further.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's always a big question mark, just because it's like, okay, how, like, are you doing client work now, or through the?
At the moment, no. I've done a couple things where I had some overlapping obligations. But my intention is to, like, right now, between the two projects, I don't know where I would find the time.
Yeah.
Really. But like the intention is to make a full on commitment and run at making NFTs work. Whether and I think I can do it.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, yeah.
But then also, like, to me, and again, this is maybe me being a crusty old boomer, I want to be able to figure out a way to bring back a way of offering an NFT and then a physical offering, whether it's a print or something else. So right now I'm working on something. I got to get past this next collection. I'm going to start doing some drops. And then I've got this idea that I'm formulating that will be a way to have NFTs and a physical offering that also brings people together at one place at one time to assemble something bigger.
Nice.
So yeah,
I mean, I like the sound of that. I too think there's a huge opportunity and just like gap in the market for physical pieces. Like whenever people have something tied to it, like buy this digital and there's actually the sketch that I did or whatever it is, I'm always just like, oh, I really want that. There's something different about holding it in your hands, but also knowing like there is that invisible thread between the digital and this. Like this is a package. I have this and like own this together.
Right. And this is where I feel like the world is going to flip completely, where it's like, okay, you could own an original Warhol, right? But they didn't have NFTs, right? So what if you owned a physical item? And I'm not calling myself Warhol or anything like that, but I am saying like the physical item would almost become secondary, especially in terms of being a digital artist, to the certifiable original version of whatever that is, right? So I think there's room here to really explore what does that mean and explore where do people hold value. I mean, there's, I don't know if you watched the documentary on the last Da Vinci. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. It's fascinating, really crazy. Somebody basically thought they found a Da Vinci in their attic or whatever, right? Couldn't prove it. Couldn't prove it was a Da Vinci, right? But it went down through the series, and I don't want to spoil the movie. It's very fascinating. But ultimately, the idea is like, to this day, even though it sold for $400 million or something crazy, 40 million, 400, I don't know. I get numbers mixed up now because we're talking trillions and billions, and I don't know. It was a large amount for most common people. That it's still not certifiable that it's a real Da Vinci. And I think in the future, the far future where we can't fully understand the implications of it yet, the fact that you can track something from moment of minting is incredibly powerful. Even if you have this secondary physical piece that is certifiable, this makes it double, if not more important, because for me, it would originate with that digital file or digital version, and then everything else becomes secondary. So I'm fascinated by this idea, and I will be working hard to find ways to elevate it and find that perfect expression. So yeah,
I think it's a wonderful direction to go. And you mentioned the waves having their own like fingerprint. Is that like, are there duplicates of individual waves? I mean, sort of like a source one. How do you look at that?
So each one's different. Each one is different. They all start from like a black and white. Like the way I work on this stuff is it's more, in my mind, a little bit more sculptural in the way I find forms and use contours and do all of this. But then being able to take a black and white image and express it 20 different ways and 20 different colors and have each one feel completely different. Because like at my store for a whole year, I only had one print design. It was like one or two. And I just changed the color. And people weren't like, oh, I like this one, but also like this. It's like, it was different enough that people could say, and this is, I think this was very interesting about Bones is like, it's fascinating to me how every single person has a different connection point, whether it's through color, whether it's through the animation, whether it's through like both of those things. And then you have there's factions of people who like the pineapples and then factions of people like the cats, right? It's very fascinating to me, like where people kind of like draw their line in the sand. It's like, this one's for me. And then there's 20 people next to them and they all drew a different line and picked a different thing. So when I say fingerprint, I just mean, and I've done fingerprint pieces, but just mean like in its characteristics, the contours are very similar to like when you zoom into a fingerprint. And everybody's different and your identity is tied to how you perceive things.
Yeah, and it definitely has me look at them differently now because I know the exact print, even though it was blurred out, like I've seen it.
Right.
So it's like, it does have me looking at it through a different lens. And only because you mentioned the pineapple, I'm going to let you go in just a minute. But I liked your why pineapple.
So the icon for HeyTVM, like the core concept, was a pineapple with an eyeball, and the concept was keep an eye on your paradise, which so many of us get lost. They get lost on that purpose and get lost on that personal mission of whatever it is. It's different for every person. So the store was an opportunity to remind people that look, things get crazy, but you got to keep an eye on your paradise if you want this life to be yours and on purpose. So that's why, and then pineapples are also, you have a pineapple in your window, right? Everybody brought in their pineapple stories. Every single story was different. Really? The big one was hospitality. That is symbolic of people being welcome. And then you have other people. It's like, no, it's a symbol for swingers. And then if it's upside down, it's like, I'm like, okay, it's not what my pineapple means. It means keep an eye on your paradise. So that's why. And then I just think everybody likes pineapples. It's like a coconut. It's like, oh, cool.
I love it because it's like your own memento mori. It's like, and you do have skulls as well, but like, as soon as I think I heard you talk about it or saw it or whatever it was, that was the connection. It was something that just stuck in my mind. I love that representation. But,
believe it or not, the skulls are stoic. As a reminder that you get one, how are you burning? Right. It's, I found out real quick at the store that old ladies hate skulls. They think they're satanic. Right. So they come in and be like, oh my God, skulls. And they'd leave. I'm like, really, and I think it's a generational thing, but for me, it's always, I think too many people, and Marcus Aurelius said, stop. He had a sign every day when he woke up that he read, says, stop acting like you got 1,000 years to live. Stop. You don't. It's like, it's already well over, right? We all have the same destination. Nobody gets out alive. So you got to make the most of it. So
yeah, it's so important. I literally have a print here that says live before you die. Like that's just like something that it's my phone wallpaper, everything, because it's so important to remember that we only have so many breaths. It's just different for everyone, but we got to make the most of it.
Make it purposeful. That's right. And nobody knows what your purpose is, but you. And I do believe that we all have our individual reasons for being here. I don't think most people find it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate, but I think, it's strange because like these days you're more and more, you have more and more opportunities to do so if you do the work, right? YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, kind of like rebooting. Like these are all opportunities, like find ways to make a living, whatever it is, Girl on YouTube makes slime, makes zillions of dollars. It's like what, right? Yeah, you're just not really asking the right questions if you're not figuring it out. I don't think so. Not to chalk it up. Oh, it's easy. No, it's not.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, you need to be open to opportunity and recognizing and pursuing and doing. It's a cycle of like action is experience is opportunity is more action. It's just you just go around in this circle nonstop.
That's right.
But yeah, so thank you so much. This is
My pleasure.
a phenomenal conversation. Where should we send people to check out everything you're doing? Follow along.
So like I think I'm at HeyTVM some places, and like Twitter and Instagram. I have not been, I've been really bad about posting and keeping up on socials on the HeyTVM front. I'm working to correct that. Not Fungible Bones is ultimately where at Not Fungible Bone on Twitter, because we were one character short the two bones, but that's where you can go check that out on Twitter. And then monsterbuzz.io is the Monster Buzz project. But yeah, I'm everywhere at HeyTVM. I'm working on getting active again. Just so much you can do in a day, right? So yeah, that's where you can find me.
I want to thank Trevor for joining me on this episode. You can find him at most places at HeyTVM, HeyTVM. So,
look at you. You can
spell.
spell.
I can spell. I'm doing it. But that was so much fun.
I enjoyed it. I like all the I almost said philosophical discussion.
There you go.
That's how educated I am. But yeah, I love all that. Like talking about the I am and Cartesian theory. I don't know if I should look at you. Yeah,
we moved the mic over there. I think look at the camera over there. Hi.
Hello.
But yeah, I love
philosophy.
Yeah.
Philosophically.
And finding just the importance in building the life that's like you wiggling your eyebrows, but like whittling. God, just all of it. I love conversations like this. I want to have more conversations like this. For
sure. And we were just talking earlier about how we need to have more conversations like this. And sure as shit, it happened. See? Manifesting.
There you go. But yeah, anyway, I think we should probably wrap here before we just go on for too long. So thanks again for tuning in. I'm Jeff Sarris.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sitting in.
You're welcome.
And this is Amara Andrews. She is the producer extraordinaire, and you can find her at byamara.com. That's B-Y, not B-U-I, B-Y-A-M-A-R-A.com. But with that, I think we will wrap. Thank you for tuning in, hitting subscribe, and the thumbs up, and we will see you next time.
Bye.